Found in an Etsy debriefing facilitation guide from 2016, I quote, "What we learn from an event depends on the questions we ask as facilitators, not just the objective data we gather and put into a document." Now, in the last lesson, you learned the most powerful shift in failure investigation, replacing the why with the how. That single change transforms defensive justification into operational narrative. This lesson shows how to embed that shift into a complete repeatable process. What follows is not theory, it's practice. This lesson walks step by step through how high-performing organizations run blameless postmortems that actually change systems. The guidance here draws primarily from two sources: the Etsy Debriefing Facilitation Guide and Google's Site Reliability Engineering Postmortem Practices. Together, they represent thousands of postmortems run at scale in environments where failure is not hypothetical. Blameless postmortems succeed or fail before anyone enters the room. Timing matters. Schedule the postmortem within 48 hours of incident resolution. That window preserves memory fidelity while allowing emotional intensity to settle. Delays allow first stories to solidify and erase the uncertainty that investigations depend on. Facilitator selection matters even more. The facilitator must not have been directly involved in the incident. This isn't a preference, it's a requirement. Facilitation is a distinct skill focused on shaping dialogue, surfacing multiple perspectives, and redirecting blame when it appears. Etsy treated facilitation as a learned capability, not an assigned duty. While you may not build formal facilitator programs immediately, you must recognize that postmortem quality is directly tied to facilitator skill. Participant selection should maximize perspective diversity. Invite everyone who detected, responded to, resolved, or was impacted by the incident, as well as adjacent teams who observed it indirectly. Homogeneous perspectives produce confirmation, not learning. Pre-work begins with a preliminary timeline built from objective artifacts: logs, alerts, chat transcripts, and deployment records. This timeline is scaffolding, not truth. Its purpose is to anchor discussion so subjective experience can be layered on to factual sequence. The first minutes determine whether participants will speak honestly or defensively. The facilitator must explicitly state that the postmortem is a learning session, not a performance evaluation. Etsy's guide emphasizes that fixing too early collapses exploration. Learning has to come first. If you go in there and say, okay, let's get this fixed, chop, chop, within 5 minutes, let's get it done. That's the opposite of what's going to give you the best results. Ground rules follow naturally. No one's in trouble. Hindsight judgments are off limits. Decisions will be examined based on the information available at the time, not the outcome. Finally, state the blameless assumption clearly. Everyone involved had good intent and acted reasonably given their context. This is not politeness, it is methodical necessity. The core work of the postmortem is building a shared timeline enriched with lived experiences. The facilitator walks through the initial timeline and invites participants to describe how events unfolded from their perspective. How questions anchor every phrase: detection, assessment, response, escalation, and resolution. These questions surface information flow, mental models, coordination mechanisms, tool behavior, and the gap between work as imagined and work as done. Objective data shows what happened. Narrative explains why it made sense at the time. Defensiveness is inevitable. Skilled facilitation treats it as data, not disruption. When participants self-blame, redirect to conditions. When justification appears, normalize by asking whether others would have acted similarly. When blame language emerges, name it and refocus on predictability rather than fault. Etsy documents cases where facilitators redirected premature self-blame into discovery of interface design flaws and systemic ambiguity. The difference between scapegoating and learning often hinges on a single follow-up question. Leadership blame is particularly dangerous. Google's SRE practice emphasizes redirection rather than confrontation to preserve psychological safety without escalating conflict. Many postmortems fail at the transition from insight to change. Etsy and Allspa caution against forcing action items during the learning session. Premature solutioning shuts down exploration. Instead, capture potential improvements and convert them into tracked actions in a follow-up session. System-focused findings describe conditions, not behavior. If a finding can be resolved by telling someone to try harder, it's not systemic. The value of a postmortem multiplies when its lessons spread. Google distributes postmortems through newsletters, reading groups, searchable repositories, and training simulations. Etsy treated postmortems as organizational vaccines, spreading learning before failure recurred elsewhere. Blameless postmortems are not documents. They are expertise-building mechanisms. When done well, they reveal how systems actually function under pressure, where vulnerabilities live, and how normal work produces both success and failure. You now have the full process. In the next lesson, we step beyond postmortems into systems thinking frameworks that make these insights repeatable at scale.